This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have coming in from Houston, Derrick Broze. He's the founder of the Conscious Resistance, and as well the Houston Freethinkers. He's a writer for BenSwan.com and the Liberty Beat. Ben Swan having been, or actually will be, a upcoming Anarchast guest. And he's also going to be doing a cross-country biking tour, planting seeds at farms. Interesting guy here, and we're going to talk about lots of really interesting topics today, including a lot of things that we haven't talked about too much in the past, things about consciousness and synchronicity and things like that. He's an interesting guy. But before we get into all of that, I always have to ask everyone, Derrick, how did you become an anarchist?
How did I become an anarchist? I think I've been an anarchist for quite some time without really being ready to say those words out loud or identify in that way, but I think at a younger age I recognized the hypocrisy of what I was being told by authorities, and everything from parental figures to school authorities. When I realized that they really didn't have any authority over me. I think at that time was when I first started thinking in terms of anarchy, but not so much later, much more recently, the past couple years, did I start understanding it in a philosophical sense.
Was there any particular turning point that you started to understand that, or any books or anything you saw or read?
Well, I think that I can credit two different books that I would say helped wake me up in the beginning or helped spur along that process. One of them was by an author named Jim Marrs, who's based out of Dallas, Texas. He's written a lot of #1 New York Times best-selling books, including Crossfire, which was about JFK, but he wrote a book called Rule by Secrecy, and that sort of woke me up to things in the sense of the power elite and the conspiratorial sense. And then I also read Ron Paul's Revolution Manifesto, and that helped me understand it in another sense. And I really haven't had much faith in political systems for quite some time, but definitely going to the Republican National Convention in 2012 and witnessing a lot of the stuff happen there firsthand and watching the way politics play out really cemented it for me finally that there was no way that change will be achieved in that fashion.
And I believe you also worked for some time with Adam Kokesh, another prior Anarchast guest. Is that correct?
Yeah, I interned with Adam about a year and a half ago, or yeah, almost 2 years ago now, and then went back up to DC to work for him, sub in while he was locked up after the shotgun incident last summer. So went up there and hosted the show till we called it quits. But yeah, we've been working together for the past 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, the shotgun incident. That's a good name for it. Yeah, so it was really interesting. So I was on Facebook, and I made this post because I find this happens a lot in life, and I think almost everyone has had these experiences, and whether it's actually something real or not, I can't say for sure, because sometimes you just mistake random things as being actually things that happen. But it seems to happen so much in life, and I've heard it all the time from people, and they've probably heard it a million times, where people say, I was looking for a job, and then it was like 3 or 4 months I couldn't get one, then all on the same day I got 3 job offers. And what I posted on Facebook was that I had these 2 properties, one here in Mexico and another in Argentina, that I was trying to sell. And I had been trying to actually sell them for about 2 years, and had very little interest in either of them. And it wasn't a big deal. I just wasn't using them, and so I thought I might as well sell them. And so I wasn't all that concerned about it. But then on the exact same day, both sold. One sold to a guy in China who's actually from Germany in Bitcoin, and the other one sold, I don't even know who the buyer of the other one was, but all on the same day. So, and that's like all over the world, these things are all just happening all on the same day. And I posted that, and Derrick mentioned that he was talking a lot about that recently, synchronicity, and how it actually relates to anarchism. So maybe you can say some words on that, Derrick.
Yeah, definitely. I think synchronicity is a really interesting topic because, as you said, sometimes we can maybe mistake everyday happenings for being connected to us, but at the same time, everything really is connected, and as far as I understand it, we're all basically made up of energy, and we're all of the same energy, and so we're basically of the same essence, and with that in mind, it's hard to look at life without seeing things as connected. And I think synchronicity is basically the ability or the awareness when you, like you did with the the properties where things just seem to come together and we happen to be aware of it, and we're just like, wow, how did this happen? Or for me, sometimes I'll be something will happen, and then much later, looking back, I can see how that one incident led to so many other things, and that's what some people would call a synchronicity. And that idea, the idea of being more consciously aware and also being an anarchist, is something that I'm exploring with a friend of mine, John Vibes, in a book that we're working on to release by the end of this year called The Conscious Resistance: Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality.
Well, that sounds interesting. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So, John and I met 2 years ago as well. He's from the East Coast. He lives in Maryland. He's a writer. He also helped me get some of my first writing jobs. So we started working through the internet, and eventually we worked together in person and realized that we both had a sense of spirituality or interest in some counterculture topics like psychedelics or hallucinogenic therapy, meditation, different things like that, and also consider ourselves to be voluntarists, anarchists. And I started to have him as a guest on my show, on my radio show at the time, and we just had these discussions about this, and more we realized that there was quite a bit to talk about, and other people started to get encouraged and to reach out about these ideas. And so back in April of last year, I think was the first time that we met, I spoke about this at Anarchy in NYC, just about what I see as the synthesis of an existing synthesis between the philosophy of anarchy, self-rule, self-government, and different spiritual beliefs like shamanism, Buddhism, and some people would say Taoism, and others would even say Christianity. But so we started to look at these different topics, and that's where the book is going to start at, is basically looking to the crowd that doesn't believe in the state, doesn't believe in a government, but also isn't looking at reality in the strict sense of a strictly rational sense. And some of those ideas that we're going to get into in the book include everything from looking at animal consciousness. We have a really good essay that we're working on called "Are We Really All One?" Looking at individuality versus collectivism, and that idea, the importance of your inner child and your path to freedom, and also looking at some similarities between agorism, that philosophy of anarchy, and Buddhism, those connections there. So quite a bit of topics that we're going to get into. And what else? There's also looking into addiction and shamanism and spirituality and music and healing, and a lot of different topics that I think, and as I've been finding out, that there are other anarchists who are also interested in these type of topics, looking in their reality from a different perspective.
Yeah, I've really noticed that. There's been so many sort of interesting things coming into sort of the more anarchist, what I call sort of the community of freedom-minded people and people who believe in self-ownership and don't believe in collectivism. And it's attracting all kinds of interesting people now. I was up at Pork Fest. I couldn't believe how many hippies were there. And I hadn't seen that before, because I actually don't normally camp, and that, I didn't even camp at Pork Fest. I stayed in the hotel. I'm not a camper. I'm really just a city boy at heart. I just don't like sitting in a tent out in the woods too much, although I'm sure there's some attraction that I would enjoy about it, but I don't really seek it out too much. But I was just amazed how many hippies, they're all with their drum circles and their hacky sacks and all this. And I was asking them, I go, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, and they talk very hippie-like, and they're like, well, man, I always knew that there's only one love, and we're all the same, and we all come from the same energy. And then I heard about the non-aggression principle, and I said, yeah, man, that's totally what I believe in. So they got attracted to it. And then you see a lot of other interesting things happening. And I've been talking about this a lot, and you brought it up, shamanism, and how it relates to addiction, and there's certain hallucinogenic, I don't call them drugs, I call them plants, because that's what they are. That really seem to offer incredible benefits and in some ways, and one of them is ayahuasca, which I'm talking about a lot. And you're seeing a lot of this sort of thing going around. Joe Rogan's I really like Joe Rogan, and hopefully he'll be an anarchist soon. He's had Stefan Molyneux on a number of times now, and we'll get him to understand the philosophy of anarchy. And once he does, I think he'll be an anarchist. But I don't think he's quite there yet. But yeah, he just doesn't have that understanding of the idea yet. But he talks a lot about things like that, ayahuasca and things like that. So you had brought it up, that shamanism and its relation to addiction and things like that. I've heard that so many people have gotten over certain addictions through using these substances and going through this process. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to write on that topic because I myself have, and I've talked about this before with Luke Rutkowski of We Are Change, and I'm pretty open about it. But I had an addiction to crystal meth about going on 9 years ago when I was 20 years old, and I ended up getting locked up and spending some time behind bars. And that was one of the first things that led me to start waking up and looking at the world in a very different manner. So we're going to write about the power of these plants, these gifts that come from nature, like you mentioned, ayahuasca. There's also iboga, some would say peyote, and other substances out there used by various tribes in different countries around the world for healing, for learning. And also, we're going to look at the idea that some people seem to establish once they get into these substances, and they'll, just like anything else, just like the government or anything else external, they'll sort of give their power away and believe that they need these substances and become self-reliant on them as well. Maybe not addicted in the traditional sense, because these substances aren't physically addictive, or these plants, none of them are physically addictive in that manner. They're just gonna, give you a reset and help you look at your life from a different perspective. But some people, and I've seen this happen a few times to people who have a good understanding, and then they know what they're looking for, but then they assume that the LSD or the marijuana or the ayahuasca or whatever is the tool that they need, and without that tool then they are incapable of finding these same truths. They come to some type of profound truth while on these substances, but then believe that they're unable to do that without them. And so we're going to write about that as well, and just try to look at it from different angles, especially, as I said, coming from somebody who I do feel like I have had healing experiences from different plants. And there's also studies that we're going to include in there. One of them I actually wrote about last week was a recent study that showed meditation, which is something else we're going to be writing about, how meditation, mindfulness meditation therapy actually was more effective in a study versus traditional 12-step program therapy for substance abuse. And these ideas are out there, and I think that they can be helpful to any anarchist or any individual. And I believe that going into this deeper state of mind, looking inward, is going to be the ultimate final answer. That if we don't do these things and we don't figure out our own doubts and insecurities and fears that hold us back, then we're never really going to get past the statism that goes deeper than just the political level. Because we can get rid of the state and do all that kind of stuff, but if we haven't really worked on these deeper issues, which I think some of these things help you do, then we're going to create a new type of statism within another couple hundred years or so.
Yeah, and we don't need another one. One's enough. But yeah, it's really intriguing to me how all this stuff is developing, because sort of the whole field of psychiatry and these sort of things, and the whole way that the most of the people in the Western world, at least, do things seem totally wrong to me. First of all, they're doing all the wrong substances. I don't want to say drugs, because they're not drugs. Drugs are those heinous things sold by giant big pharma that kill hundreds of thousands of people a year, and are usually behind most of the atrocities that happen, whether it be a shooting or whatever. It's either usually the government or people on these big pharmaceuticals, and so yeah, or both. Yeah, usually both, actually. And it's amazing, like all the things that are kind of bad is what everyone's doing, and you can see these things are bad. There's enough evidence and enough things that you can see about it. Almost every shooting, I think, of the last 30 years in the U.S., any mass shooting, the person was on one of these pharmaceuticals like Adderall or Prozac or whatever it might be, and these are very lobotomizing chemicals. And then when they're not doing that, they're drinking alcohol, which I'm obviously not against alcohol because I drink quite a bit of wine and other things, but it really doesn't expand your mind too much, and mostly dumbs you down. So these are the things that most people are doing. These are the things that the state promotes, and I think they do that for a reason, because they don't want people to get access to even things like marijuana, which might make you think a little differently and maybe question a few things and kind of see things in a different light. And then, of course, you can go into much more stronger forms of plants that might even completely change your state of mind, and really open you up to the fact that we're all just one energy, people here on Earth. We're not separated because this government calls us an American, this one calls us a Canadian, things like that. So it's just amazing to me how it's like almost everything that we see in our society today, especially in the US, is all just totally wrong. And then when they're really screwed up, they go to a psychiatrist and they sit there for like weeks talking about stuff, and I don't know if that really does much either. And I'm starting to sound like Tom Cruise here, because I think he's talked a lot about these things. And I'm not a Scientologist, by the way, and I don't know if there's anything good or bad about Scientology, but I actually hear that the auditing they do is interesting. And I like to try everything once, so I might try that at some point, because I've heard some people have had some good experiences with doing what the Scientologists call auditing. And I do want to try ayahuasca. I'm just way too busy right now to do any of these things, but I do want to do what you said earlier, which is continue to expand my mind, continue to explore, continue to improve myself, continue to look inward and get rid of any fears or any negative things that I have inside of me. And I don't have many anymore. I talked about this on the last Anarchast. I've never been a fearful person, and in the last 10 or 15 years, I've really just worked to get rid of any kind of fear in my life. And the only one left, as I said the other day, is sharks. But I think that's a rational fear. But yeah, it's incredibly interesting. So I'm sure your book's going to be fascinating. And it sounds like you're covering so many topics. I think it's going to end up taking quite a bit of time.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have a partner in John Vibes, because he's you know, we're pretty much on the same page with these ideas, but he's a really prolific writer, and you know, we're going to be looking at all those topics I mentioned, and music and healing and reality beyond the five senses. There's a lot to cover in this area, but we want to do it because, as far as I know from what we've been able to see, there's not really much anarchist literature that's out there promoting these ideas and bringing them together, although I would say there are a number of spiritual anarchists, and that in the book as well, we're going to define these terms, you know, what we mean when we say anarchism, what we mean when we're referencing spirituality and these different topics. So I hope it'll spark a conversation and get people interested in some of these topics. And also, I'm not asking everybody to you know, get involved and create some type of anarcho-shamanism or anything like that. This is just another method, I believe, a further involvement of looking within yourself and finding ways to be truly free.
Yeah, it's funny too, because a lot of the people who really need to do some of these plants are so against them, and they've never done them, which is funny. Like, you see those people on Fox, and like I forget all their names because I can't even stand them. I can't even look at them for more than a few seconds. My heart starts to race because they're just yelling and they're angry and they hate. And they really are, they're so against like marijuana and all these kinds of things. It's like, if anyone really needs to do some of these things, it's those people, but they're the people who are most against it. And they use the violence of the state to try to make it so no one else does it either. It's crazy. And you brought up music. I think that's an interesting concept of music, and I think it's something that everyone can relate to, because there's very few people on Earth who don't like music. You have to be really cold-hearted. I bet Dick Cheney doesn't like music. I think he hates everything. So, but most people, 99.99%, like music, whatever the music might be. And I think that's an interesting concept, because that's a way we can relate to people on how certain outside substances, you could call music a substance or a energy, you could call it energy for sure, because it's just vibrations in your eardrum, that can actually change your mindset, change the way you think, improve your mood, things like that. And I know you and especially John Vibes, that's his name, right? John G. Vibes? Yeah. Yeah, he's really into music. Are you with him on that?
Yeah, definitely. You know, the thing is, another interesting thing about us, when we started to work together, we realized that both of us, you know, he lives in Maryland and I'm in Houston in Texas, that we both do similar things as far as outside of writing, that we also promote music events. In Houston, I'm a partner in a cooperative called Visionary Noise, and we book all kinds of shows around the city. A lot of them are benefits for various causes, anti-war shows, and they're partnered with the Houston Freethinkers, and it's just a way for us to get beyond just talking to activists. And that's one of the other things that we'll be addressing in the book, and something that I call moving between worlds, just being able to, which is what a shaman does, is, you know, go into these trance states to go in between worlds and bring back information and knowledge and healing, and put that into the idea of moving beyond just anarchist or libertarian circles and activist circles in general, and bringing people together through music and art events, and really creating a new conscious culture and giving people something to be involved in. What we find when we do these events, including a huge festival that we do every 3 to 4 months, and it's a big free festival. We just did it in February. It brings out thousands of people, and we got written about in the paper. You know, this is exposing lots of people to what the Houston Freethinkers is about. We're passing out information about anarchy. We're talking to them about just being free in their own mind, and really just trying to get them to, you know, challenge the typical environment that they're around. They're in an environment where there's art, there's, you know, dancing, there's people just being free, and the whole environment is completely for free, and there's all types of music and all types of people coming together. And I think music is definitely a healing tool, and it is also a way for us to spread awareness, spread the message, and to build community, and to get, like I said, beyond these barriers that we put ourselves in.
Yeah, that's great, and stay tuned, because I probably will soon be announcing Anarchapulco here in Acapulco, which I hope will be some sort of festival of freedom festival here in Acapulco. And I know you're in Houston, so it's a nice, easy 2.5 direct flight to Acapulco. I hope you can come down. Maybe we can have some of the music and things that you guys do at the event. And of course, we're going to have so many past Anarchast guests down here, and it'll actually be one of the first freedom conferences in a semi-free place, because most of the freedom conferences I go to are in the US, and I just laugh because you can't do anything. It's like you smoke here, you can't drink here, you can't buy alcohol here, you can't sell alcohol there, and down here there's nothing like that. And so it's actually a much better environment. Just going back a little bit about how there's this interesting mix of people coming into these sort of movements now, and I brought up the hippies and stuff, and I think I must really confuse a lot of people who think about the old paradigms of things, because a lot of people think, well, hippies, they like drugs, and they you know, they wear flowers in their hair and stuff like that, and they're very liberal, they're very Democrat and all that kind of stuff, because they want all these social programs. And then there's the other side where it's the conservative side, where you're supposedly pro-business and all that kind of stuff, and you would never touch any drugs or anything. And I think I confuse a lot of people, because I like all those things. I'm a capitalist, I'm a businessman. I think plants are an amazing way to open your mind in some cases. It's definitely a useful tool if you want to get more introspective and open your mind more. And it's really interesting to see all these groups kind of coming all into the similar wavelength right now. And that's sort of where we started, was about energy. There seems to be just this energy all moving in this direction right now, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's a good vibe moving through, lots of fresh new minds and people working on solutions, and I think overall there is a push towards more action-oriented anarchy, and also towards a more conscious anarchy. And that's really all I'm trying to promote and just live and be about, is just trying to spread this message that, you know, we can rule ourselves, and we don't need the government. We also don't need anyone else to tell us what our, you know, our connection to nature, to spirit, to your own self is. You know, that's one of the things that I love about shamanism, is it's been called the aboriginal roots of religion, and basically it's what existed before the state and the religious institutions came along and started defining who had the connection to nature and to God and to the universe and to that one consciousness. And it's your direct connection to that, and nobody can get in between that. Nobody can tell you, you know, what that is and what it isn't. So I really appreciate the correlations between those, and I hope that other people will look more into that.
Yeah, and I think there's also something that you're kind of alluding to there a little bit that I've definitely noticed. And I lived a lot of the time down here in Mexico, and I've spent a lot of time in places like Peru and Chile and all that. And there's a lot more people who are actually Mexicans. Not many people know this. They're basically Native Americans. They live in Mexico. So it all came from that sort of group. And of course, you know, in the last few hundred years, a lot of the Europeans just went in and destroyed all these cultures, and these cultures had so many great things about them, including shamanism, and they use things like peyote here in Mexico, and very good things, and they've just been destroying them and turning it into instead of people. And you look at the U.S. on another sort of tangent, so many of these horrible things, and you brought up crystal meth, and I've done that once, and I won't do it again. That was enough. Actually, I actually did way too much. I thought it was like cocaine, and so yeah, and no one told me. And so I was with my girlfriend. I said, okay, let's try this crystal meth. I heard about it. Let's just see what it's all about, because otherwise we can't have any opinion on it unless we've at least tried it. And so we lined up a bunch of lines and chopped them up and all that. And man, we did like 5. I think we watched the movie Bats, which is a terrible movie, like 8 times in a row, and it seemed like 5 minutes. And then we couldn't sleep for days. And the things I was hallucinating because I hadn't slept like from sleep deprivation in 3-4 days was unbelievable. That was wild. It's amazing what your mind can create. Like there was this black guy who was always right beside me, and he's just always there. And like he never changed, and there's always this old woman at the window, and she looked as real as could be. It was as real as, you know, as real life seems to be. And she'd always be looking out the window, and she'd be all paranoid, and I was like, holy crap, this is crazy. I was like, what is going on? But a lot of the Western culture, again, they use all these chemical concoctions, and it's because all these really good plants have been really just ran out of things through things like conquest of the Europeans through all this region, and making all these things illegal, and then making, like Mitt Romney, that I couldn't believe well, I can believe what he said, because everything he says is ridiculous and evil, but there was this one guy in a wheelchair came up to him when he was running for president, overseer of the U.S., and he said to him, listen, I'm got terrible disabilities. I forget what he had, a bunch of things. He could barely move. And he said, you know, the only thing that really helps me is marijuana, and it really makes me feel like I'm normal, like I feel good. And Mitt Romney said, he said, Mitt Romney, if you're president, will you legalize marijuana? And Mitt Romney looked at him in the eyes, I couldn't believe it, and said, no, I will not. He said, but we have come up with a synthetic marijuana, which will be legal. So it's chemicals to replace a perfectly natural and good plant. Oh, it's just unbelievable, all these things that they're doing.
It's the corruption of nature, and I think that kind of goes along with the program that we see happening all around the world. Is basically just those who wish that they were in power are just working to corrupt everything natural and good. You know, it's just it's their plan. But I think there are also a lot of other people who are working to create positive solutions. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a yin and yang thing. There's a lot of positive things going on, but there's a lot of negative things going on. And sort of like what you said, like without government, who would corrupt the world? You know, like I can't believe people like government. Every single thing they do, and it's not just government, of course. It's the corporations which use the government. Without government, the corporations couldn't do most of these things that they do. If they couldn't use violent force to make you use a substance, not many people are going to use these horrible substances. And if they have access to decent substances, then they'll use those. And it's only the government that enables them. You're not going to see, for example, Budweiser beer coming down the block with a bunch of guns shooting people if they're using some substance other than beer. Companies just don't do that. They don't really last too long. People kind of stop buying from them when they do that. But when the government does it, everyone thinks it's fine. And one sort of last sort of topic here, we're running a little long, but you mentioned that you were addicted to crystal meth, and that you were thrown in a cage for it. And that's just another just horrible thing that this system does. You have a person here who's got a problem. You were addicted to crystal meth, and I assume that was not a good thing in your life. And so what do? They use violence and put you in a cage. This whole society is so uncaring. In a lot of places in Europe, even especially Portugal, where all substances are legal, they've done more of the right thing. And I don't like any government to do anything, but I much prefer that if you find someone who's got a major problem, they're massively addicted to some substance, that you actually try to help them get better, and you're caring, and you try to get them into some sort of facility or some sort of way that they can deal with this, rather than using violence and putting them in a cage, which really I don't think solves too much. Although maybe you can say from your experience if that experience helped you.
Well, this is what I will say about that, because I have said things in the past, and I think that maybe I haven't been clear enough on it, that it definitely was not the institution that made my turnaround. Because getting locked up, that whole experience itself was life-changing, and I chose to use the time in a setting that is not designed and not encouraging towards those who are seeking actual rehabilitation, all the way from the county jail to the state facilities to the various programs that I was sent to I ended up doing a total of 18 months, and it was first 1 year, and then I was on probation for a while, and I smoked pot a couple of times and went back, and I ended up doing most of it in getting a felony, so I have a felony now on my record. But all those things also led me towards pursuing, you know, okay, well, I need to start my own business, and basically becoming an entrepreneur and discovering agorism and realizing that I had to be my own boss if I was going to have to deal with having this X on my back because of this crime. But it wasn't the institution itself that, you know, helped me get to where I am now. It was basically a personal choice, and I think that's what it comes down to. But definitely being in a country, like you said, Portugal, that provides these services, or at least looks at people who have you know, drug problems or, you know, substance abuse problems as patients instead of as criminals. It's a lot more encouraging to do that. But yeah, definitely I was in a place where it's filled with ego, and you know, they don't give a shit what you think or where you come from or what you have to say, or, you know, they treat you just as bad as everyone else. And it was a very eye-opening experience in a lot of ways, but I chose to use that time just to write a lot. I mean, I wrote a lot just from observation, watching people cling to their race and their religion and just different things, and watching how we behave when we're in a cage and the way we treat each other, and just, you know, like I said, a lot of that ego stuff. So I spent a lot of time writing and observing and getting into meditation while I was there, and that was, you know, a difficult thing to be in that environment and to pursue meditation. And I think it was, you know, one of the more big pushes for me to keep going, because I had a lot of encouragement throughout that time. And by the time I got out, after all that self-reflection, it definitely set me on a path that has led me to where I am now.
That's great. I find the word addiction and the way that people talk about addiction as being bizarre. I don't really believe there is a true physical addiction for most natural substances. Certainly not marijuana. There is no physical addiction. And of course, things like ayahuasca, mushrooms, you don't get physically addicted to them. You might, you know, like you said, you might use it a lot because you think you need it for certain things or whatever, but that's not really addiction. And when you hear all these sort of what you would call the neocon or conservative people who are very anti-plants, anti-drugs, they always bring that up, that, oh, if we allowed that to be legal, it'd cause everyone to be addicted to them. And it's just totally ridiculous. Of course, you look at Colorado, and of course, first of all, this making drugs illegal doesn't make people stop using them at all. All it does is create a ton of violence involved with it, and a ton of cost, and chasing people around and searching people all day. But people still do them, so that's ridiculous in the first place. And secondly, like I just pointed out, that most of these things, natural substances, are not addictive, and you never see anyone who's addicted to mushrooms. I've never seen that anyway. You know, I've done mushrooms a few times, and that was enough. It was very interesting, though. I'm glad I did it. And it's just funny that that's what they use as this addiction. Of course, there is some fairly bad substances, and these are actual chemicals, things like crack cocaine, where they're mixing a lot of things like crystal meth, and these are all things that have been created because the government won't let these other things come in at a decent price. If cocaine and marijuana and all those sort of things were legal and allowed to function in a market, I think they say cocaine would be worth like about the same as salt, and marijuana, of course, it'd be super cheap. But what they do now is they legalize it, and then they tax it to death, and so it's still not cheap. So some people start using these other substances like bath salts and stuff like that, and then they use that as a reason why we should make all drugs illegal. And it's like, no, you're causing that problem. Most of the problems caused by humans are actually just most problems humans have are caused by humans, and most of it's caused by government and statism and this bizarre notion that people think that we have to have this violent group of thugs and murderers rule over us, so which is bizarre. But hopefully they're starting to wake up.
Definitely. I think there are a lot more people waking up, man, and it's a good thing to see.
Yeah. Well, we should leave it at that. That was really interesting, and really glad to have you on as Derrick Broze. And why don't you just let us know of anywhere that we can get some information from you, any of the places you write, and any of your radio shows, websites. You seem like a busy guy.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the interview, Jeff. Everybody can find out all my information as far as my main projects at theconsciousresistance.com. That's the home of the Conscious Resistance Network, where I host a Sunday night show every Sunday at 8 p.m. Central, and there's a couple other programs and some other writers on our team, but we look at things from this anarchist, conscious perspective. And also the HoustonFreethinkers.com is the activist group I'm involved with here in Houston. I write for the Liberty Beat, Ben Swan, Activist Post, and the Anti-Media. And yeah, just get in touch. I love to collaborate with people and to work with others, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
I do too. Thank you very much. And that's another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
This is Anarchast.